This is Pamela Kuhn, and the curtain is up on Center Stage, the show about the arts and the artists behind their work. Artist Paul Cézanne said, "Painting from nature is not copying the object. It is realizing one's own sensations." Well, my dear friends at the Flinn Gallery at the Greenwich Library are dipping into their creative realm of sensations once again. Curators Leslie Ash and Alexis Abrams present Forms of Nature, featuring the art of Joan Goldin and Leigh Mickelson. The exhibition runs from October 27th through December 7th. This is the Flynn's second exhibit of the season, and Forms of Nature illuminates nature's countless guises. The exhibition is filled with prints, paintings, and sculptures, all showing an extraordinary breadth of inspiration. I have with me today artists Leigh Mickelson and Joan Goldin, and curators Leslie Ash and Alexis Abrams. Ladies, it is wonderful to have you.
Thank you.
So I got my sneak peek. I got my sneak peek of the exhibition yesterday, and I have to say my first reaction was, this is like a breath of fresh air. So we've heard from the curators now about the whole genesis and your ideal behind this. So now let's hear from the artists themselves. So Leigh Mickelson, I'm going to introduce you first. I know you're not a stranger to my show. We spoke when you headed the Clay Arts Center. And of course, your husband, Matt Mickelson, is my partner in crime during many of my shows covering film. And of course, our adoration of Star Wars, which I don't think we're going to talk about today, Lacey. You're off the hook. But
that's good. I can't talk about it as much as he can.
So tell us, I walked into the Flynn yesterday, and here is this beautiful open space, this amalgamation of gorgeous natural prints, and I will say that the natural side of nature. And then Leigh, you're fantastic, and I mean that word in its very strictest meaning. Fantastic sculptures. And so, what did you bring together on this for this exhibition?
Well, it's a real pleasure to be, working, being in a space with a two-dimensional artist. That also draws inspiration from nature. I think that, I haven't had very many opportunities to show with painters. I mean, I have in the past, but to be able to show this many pieces, and we really got an opportunity to have our work speak to each other by being in proximity to each other. And while I looked at her work prior to the show and saw that we definitely pull from nature, and we kind of reframe it in our minds and in our hands, and it becomes something else when we make the work. I think what's great is that there's these threads of similarity in some of the pieces and some of the content, that I think really makes it feel like a cohesive show, not just the subject matter. But I think that, I've been, ever since I've been making art, I've been abstracting nature in one way or another, and it hasn't gotten tiring yet. So to be in a room with another person who has this similar affinities has been really wonderful.
You're talking about this fantastic virtuosity of both of you artists, really, because you're so different, but yet there is a similarity, as you talk about, and it really comes in the sense, to me, of texture and color. Am I on the right road there, Joan Goldin? Can I bring you into this?
I was mostly black and white, but I have moved into color because I find it expresses now more how I feel. I can walk into a garden, and at one point I would have planted myself in the dark. I would have dug down, as in the peat bogs in Ireland, which I love, and that's my thinking. I'm thinking also the work kind of expresses what is going on in the world for me. As nature becomes tighter and tighter and more insular. So my work often goes to the dark side, even though I use color. I can keep it buoyant with color, but in my head, often is the dark side. So I can wander in that garden and I can look up and I can look down. I can look on a cellular level as I could in medicine. I look for boundaries and a place for myself in this garden. So, and we're always trying to find who we are. We don't know who we are. So that's my origin. That's my thinking in most of my work.
Now, I want to point out, ladies, that we've already touched on Star Wars in some way. I mean, she's talking about the dark side. Isn't it amazing? It's 6 degrees of separation. We can never get away from Star Wars. But, you know, Joan, this is interesting to me because your background is fascinating. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself as a medical illustrator?
Yes, I actually I started when I was 11 or 12 years old going to a first autopsy. That wouldn't happen now, but I always wanted to know what was under the skin. So and I always felt that I couldn't draw if I didn't know. I couldn't draw the figure unless I knew what was under the skin. So that kind of led me to medical art. I had surgery at the age of 13, and I was drawing in my room, and a resident came in and said, "Oh, why don't you look into medical art?" And so I did.
This is fascinating.
Yeah, so that was a trajectory, and so it's medical school. I would have loved to have been a surgeon, but my hand stays in a two-dimensional space. So
interesting, because I think there is a direct correlation between doctors and art, of course.
Yes.
I've talked about this before on Center Stage. But Joan, it's interesting to me, you know, when you talk about that kind of illustration, which is so specific, but yet what you have on display at the Flinn is, to me, is very broad and open and
Yes.
wondrous. You're inviting us into this huge space. So have you morphed in your life, you know, to that point?
Well, not really. In surgery, in a field of surgery, you can focus on something quite specific in a small territory, small area.
Mm-hmm.
But the area around it is more flexible. You know, it can be a little fresher, freer, and in expression. So I kind of pulled some of that into some of the medical work. I did a surgical atlas on cancer surgery. So that took 5 years and a lot of focus sites. So
you know, I've got to tell you right now that 11 or 12, I would have just died if I'd seen a dead body, I think. I mean, I don't think I could have done this with, but you must have been destined to have that curiosity and about the form.
Yes.
And my gosh, you should be writing books. You should be writing bestsellers, become the medical examiner. I mean,
well, it didn't mean that I didn't have nightmares.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, but you're also from Chicago.
Yes.
And you, it's mind-blowing to me about your background, really. And you've been a PhD candidate from the European Graduate School in Switzerland. I mean, was this all within art? You know, your MFA at Bard and of course your BFA at Arts Institute of Chicago. So you're within the world of art completely now.
Yes, but I always wanted to bring language in. It was a little over my head. It was another craft, another art form. I found it very difficult, very challenging. Mm-hmm. And I went through the course. I didn't finish the PhD. I didn't want to spend 7 years in language. I wanted to go back to 2 dimensions, so to my canvases.
Yeah,
but I certainly learned so much. And it pushed a direction. It challenged me to the point where, I love reading philosophical books. I love playing with language, bringing language into my work. And my work often begins with language. Yes. You know, I can sit and I can read for hours and then all of a sudden, oh yeah, I've got an idea now. So you dig through words and then it ends up on a canvas.
Fascinating, Joan. Wow. Well, Leigh, now you'd have spent time at the Clay Arts Center. I know when we last spoke, you were heading that. And you've had 24 years of experience in nonprofit arts management and program development. You're really the girl that is finding structure for all the rest of us as artists, aren't you?
Yes, I think that's like, that's my other hat. I feel like I have two hats in my life. I have my artist hat and my arts management hat. And I really enjoy working and then, with nonprofits. And I'm a consultant now, and I'm kind of using all the skills I learned the last 24 years to help arts and culture nonprofits perform better, to grow and develop. And I think being an artist that has learned on the job how to be an administrator has, given me a unique insight into, that business world. And I think my studio practice alongside that career it's always been there. But what's nice is I have not put that pressure on myself to make a career out of my art. And that's what I think has given me the freedom to right. make what I want to make and explore. And now that I'm not, an executive director at a nonprofit, I do have that balance where I can be in the studio more and I can explore new ideas and, create that push pull that I'm looking for in my work. When Joan was saying, how she often is at that dark place and, now she's kind of bringing out this color. I totally relate. I feel like my work has gotten more colorful over the years. And I do try to have, to pull people in, but also, keep them away, which is why I have all these spikes in my work and spiky, something that will lure you in and then repel you, which is kind of what I, took out of the pollination, using pollination as a metaphor for human relationships. So I've been playing around with that, but balancing the studio practice with my career as a consultant, it's been a joy. I mean, I really like working on both sides. I guess I have two sides to my brain. So.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure, and that's the balance. Therein lies the balance. What I love is that you developed the Westchester Craft Crawl. It's been very successful and gives artists a chance to exhibit their work. And then you also in 2019 established your consulting company, LTM Arts Consulting. So since Clay, you've done more than just have two sides of the brain. I mean, you've become an entrepreneur. Yeah. And I know better than anyone the importance of selling your art and building a platform for others to be able to do it themselves and enjoy. Can you talk to me about that whole feeling of building something and being an architect?
Oh, that's a wonderful way of putting it. It has really been building something. It's really different building my own businesses as opposed to working for a nonprofit. It's I've been able to apply a lot of the same, thinking to building it, but it's been a learning experience, kind of, nurturing a new business and also helping other arts organizations and artists nurture their own businesses too. So the Craft Crawl kind of was born out of the pandemic. Really, it was about like, here I was going to be at a craft show that got canceled because of the pandemic, and I was like, what can I do? I have all this art. I have like my studio is filled to the brim with stuff that I was going to bring to that show. And I was so disheartened, and I just kind of figured out a way to kind of turn it on its edge. And we put together this beautiful high-end professional studio tour and invited all the artists. Everybody was so appreciative to have an opportunity to be in the public space again and in a safe environment. And it's just kept going. So that's the Craft Crawl. And the consulting business was just like, after 24 years of doing, the nonprofit grind, trying to refigure out my life, and the consulting thing kind of just, it actually sort of fell in my lap. From like, oh, well, can you come help me do this? Can you help me with that? And then I was like, oh, there might be something to this, and maybe a consultant is something I can try on. And it's been going really well. And I really love it. I love the flexibility. I love being able to help more than one, organization figure out how to grow and meet their challenges and overcome, whatever it is they're going through. So,
exciting.
And it's been also nice to be in the studio again. I can say that for sure. Yeah.
Would we all agree that that has been the upside of the pandemic, that for artists, especially visual artists and writers, some musicians to a certain point, there has been an opportunity not to be distracted by the outside world so much and choose to be able to do your art with, without any holes on you. I think it's an interesting flip side to the pandemic.
Definitely. I would say that a lot of people during the pandemic, a lot of creatives that I know had a hard time working during the pandemic and felt stifled. And I, for some reason, I was like, this is a gift. I felt like, I can go into my studio instead of being in front of the TV and watch Netflix, and I can actually be productive. I was glad that I had that response to it. I mean, not right away, but after a month of lockdown, I was like, hey, I'm going to be out there.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting for myself. I'm a deadline person, and for once there were no deadlines because nothing was happening in the musical world, and that gave me a new kind of freedom, which I really cherished. And there was no sense of competition or auditions. It was just about you and your art, and I think it was a rare and wondrous time. Perhaps not wonderful, but it depends on how you look at it. Leigh, one thing
for the gallery, we had to take a pause. And so this season is our first I consider our first normal, if you will, season with our 6 shows. Last season we did open, but we opened with 5 shows. We kept the first one longer because we really didn't know whether people would be coming out. But we've been really delighted. People are coming again.
They're starved for that live sense of experiencing
really exciting.
art.
It's been really exciting to see people come back.
Excellent. Alexis, can I ask you something personally?
Yes.
You and I have never really spent any time together. Your work with Leslie, did you have any kind of central inspiration yourself? I mean, you personally, for this installation?
Personal inspiration for it? I'm very driven by anything visual, and for me it's inspiring, especially the color. I don't always work in color or have worked in color. I am trained as a fashion designer, and I've always been more towards neutrals and blacks, and so being part of seeing all the colors and really selecting colors was an amazing inspiration for me. I really, really enjoyed that. Yes.
What I love, ladies, is that you're choosing to do this forms of nature in the fall, which is usually a time reserved for going out and picking apples, and you're bringing us life, which I think is most wondrous. Joan, to that end, I'm very interested in photography myself, and I know that you are too, in the combination of prints and paintings and photographs. How does photography figure into this exhibition in your art?
Photography is, I would say, central, because I can get to my topics or my images fast. I can't overthink. So it begins as a photograph. Of course, I photographed in surgery because I had the radical surgery book that I did. You saw it 1 time, 2 times, maybe that's it. We were lucky to get a procedure that we could photograph. So I couldn't illustrate it unless I had some very specific images. But it works for me, and it was very difficult. I love analog. I like film. Film has an emulsion. And when that was taken away from me, I was very sad and had to reinvent myself. So that's when I began to paint over photographs and try to reintroduce that in between, that space that is luminous that I lost in digital. So digital is very interesting. Digital works very well for me now, but I integrate the two. So the immediate photograph and the digital now, it's another iteration for me now.
Yeah, I can see that. And luminous, that really says it. That really explains it well. I adore that. Well, in that same way, Leigh, I have to actually point out the obvious fact about your sculptures. I mean, to me, two things. Because I'm such a fan of film, I have to relate to The Day of the Triffids. I don't know if you remember that film from 1,000 years ago, of these plants coming alive. And there's something in your sculptures about your plants, and there's a sense of succulence in them to me that are very much alive. And I'm interested to hear you talk before about the stinging quality, but also there's an obvious connection to a look of COVID. And these are things you did way before COVID, but here you are. And so you're either psychic or you're connected to another source somehow. I mean, are you conscious about that? Would you agree with me?
I'm hearing it all the time now when people are looking at my work, but what I like to say is that nature repeats itself, and it absolutely does. And one of the first big inspirations for me was this book called The Private Life of Plants, and I found it in grad school, and it was in the oversized section, and it was in German. So it was all these large photographs of the inside parts of plants blown up, magnified. And what I found fascinating was how much they look like body parts. And all of a sudden, here was this abstract organic form that I was finding, feeling similar to in terms of body parts, and so it was, Joan is a medical illustrator. I was looking at like plant dissection magnifications too. So the minute and the macular, right? Like you can push in and you can pull away, and there's so many similarities. So COVID, which is now like everywhere, that form, also looks like a lot of pollen forms, and it looks like a lot of virus, other virus forms, and it looks like, in the middle part of a plant, of a flower. And it also looks like an underwater anemone, it looks like all these things. So I like to say that nature repeats itself, and that, this is kind of something that brings us all together. There's only, it's like the golden mean, it's there in so many different creatures and forms. And my work is definitely an amalgam of animal, vegetable, mineral. So, people have come into my studio and said, oh, it's like Little Shop of Horrors in here, or they'll tell me that it looks like Dr. Seuss or Tim Burton, or and it's all that, I can just say, yes, they're like these flowers of my imaginations, or that, people say that it looks like an alien planet. And I love all that reaction. And at first with the COVID thing, people were very repelled by that. And one person challenged, like, how could you possibly like use that form at a time like this? And I'm like, artists talk about what's going on around themselves all the time, and this is no different. But it just so happens that actually I wasn't talking about COVID. So
but just on a psychological level, there are those of us who want to walk into fear to own it. And if we want to meet COVID head on, we want to own it suddenly. And I'm sure that sales of all your sculptures went up during a certain time in COVID.
They did. It's funny. I've always been an artist that exhibited my work in galleries until just before COVID, I started making work for the garden and outdoor spaces. I had one show at a botanical center in Rhode Island, and to see my work in an outdoor space was like this is what I should be doing. So I've been consciously making work for outdoor spaces, and seeing those forms outside, you know, these COVID-like forms, or these, you know, pollen, these magnified pollen forms. You know, I just think that it kind of, the whole idea of bringing, you know, nature together with our imaginations, you know, it's just
no question.
I really enjoy that, the way that looks.
The 6 degrees of separation here is really interesting. I mean, between Joan's work and yours, and there's, wow, there's something really structurally bound in that fantastic architecture of the form. I love it. How interesting. So, well, Leslie and Alexis, I mean, did you visualize having pieces that were so close in color? So Leigh's sculptures and much of Joan's work seem to be conjugated by color and texture. Did you foresee this?
Yeah. but it grew on us as we started to work with the pieces more. I mean, when we started to do things like when we were doing the graphics, the postcards and the composites, to try and make sure that we were always showing both artists' work, because it's a two-person show. We wanted to make sure that they were reflecting that and everything. And all of a sudden we started pairing things up, and it was like, whoa, those really belong together. So we have one of Leigh's pieces that is now a sister to the sunflower painting in the back wall. And they have to be together. And we also have one of the beautiful, we call it in the show, it's a poetic number 2, but it's a beautiful piece with when you said about being surprising in the fall, I think a lot of the colors are fall colors. They really are. I mean, we're talking about a lot of color, but there's a lot of muted tones, and there's a lot of, you know, the roses and greens and browns, and there's a lot that really feels very appropriate to this season. So, you know, there's always that burst of a brighter color, but the undertone is really quite rich and more subtle.
Yeah, or as the light in the sky changes during fall, I mean, so do these rich colors. So we've got it at the Flinn Gallery, I can tell you that. Alexis, did you have any say in the fact of the openness of the gallery, the way you've set it up? There's a beautiful flow where you can see everything standing at any given point. Was that an idea for this installation?
Definitely was the idea to like have minimal walls. We just had the one wall that comes out, and to have it be an open space with the two artists together, intermixing with each other. Absolutely.
Very exciting. I love that. One thing always affects me about the Flinn is it seems to always take different shapes, even though it is just a rectangular room. And I love the playfulness in that, and what you do at the Flinn. I want to remind all my listeners that the Flinn is really volunteer, and it's plucky, and what you give to our community is rather extraordinary in imagination and structure. It's wonderful. Leigh and Joan, can I ask you both, is there any kind of central message to your work? Just very short. If I had to ask you for one phrase, you know, what is your work about? Let's start with you, Joan. Really,
I think movement, change is a big word for me. That's why I keep repeating over and over, because I want to keep moving. I mean, when is the end? I'm not looking at the end. I'm looking at the process.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So keeping motion going.
That is a very important question I often ask. You know, what you enjoy most, is it the process of divining this in your imagination, or is it the execution of making it? And I know those are two distinctly different processes. But if you like to keep in motion, I would think that the answer is the same all around. It's very exciting, Joan. Very, very exciting. Leigh, how would you encapsulate your work, and especially here?
Well, I can say that there's a lot going on in the work, but ultimately what I want is for people to feel joy when they see my work.
Yeah.
Joy. I want to make people smile. Yeah.
Yeah. And are you finding that joy in the process of making your art all the time?
Good question.
I am. Like, like when you're walking out in nature or in a garden or on a path and you turn a corner and something takes your breath away. That's what I'm looking to bring to someone, but through my art, and I can't make things as beautiful as nature can, but I think that's like the constant goal.
But what you do make has your stamp on it, which is truly original, and I love it. I just love it. Wow. Well, Leslie and Alexis, is there anything else you would like to add about this marvelous exhibition? And that includes all the obvious things about, I know you're having talks with the artists,
yes,
and of course, all the logistics about the Flinn Gallery and when it's open.
Well, I actually have been thinking this whole time about my word, so I'm going to start with that. So, because it fits perfectly with curation, I am a connector, and I've loved this process of connecting these two artists, and with connecting with Alexis to bring that to people. But yes, both artists will be speaking about their work. Joan will be speaking on Saturday because she's coming in from Chicago. Specifically for this exhibition, and she'll be staying through the weekend. So she's going to speak on Saturday, the 29th at 2:00, and we'll bring into it. She said that she isn't so verbal, but she's now proven herself wrong. She's done a wonderful job on this. So we'll see. We'll see what the shape of that all ends up, because she's perfectly capable of talking about her work. And Leigh will be speaking about her work on November 13th. It's a Sunday, November 13th, also at 2:00. And we're very excited because it's always wonderful for us and for the audiences to really hear exactly what you're getting at here. Hear with the inspiration for each of the artists and ask some of the questions. They'll be able to ask questions of, what were you thinking when you did this? What was it really behind it? And because we get asked those questions, and I say, well, save them up. They're going to be here. You can ask them that very same question.
I love it. I love it.
And the show runs until December 7th.
And those conversations will be at the Flinn itself?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. Yes. Okay. So we're living within the art.
Yes. And the opening is this Thursday night. It's Thursday the 27th from 6 to 8 p.m. So, but then it runs through December 7th.
And you'll be having an opening reception, so anyone is allowed to come in and have a glass of wine and take part.
Absolutely. Everyone is welcome and encouraged to come see the work.
Wonderful. Alexis, do you have anything to add to that? I mean, this is important, being a curator.
Yes.
It's such a huge word. It's a word now that is bandied about by rock and roll singers too. And I often think, oh, just stop that right now. Let's reserve this to the art of curation, in an artistic space. So anything else you'd like to add?
Just that it's been such a pleasure to be a part of this and to be part of the Flinn also, which is inside the Greenwich Library, which also is such a pleasure. One thing that I'm just a big proponent of is lifelong learning and accessible for all. So that's what makes the library so appealing, and also the Flinn inside of the library. I can't think of anything better, honestly.
I know.
And as a way to show artists and exceptional artists.
That's right. So, that's right. The Flinn does not do small projects, that's for sure. And they are mind-bending many times. It's interesting that you come from the world of fashion And Joan is talking about movement in her art. Whenever I think of fashion, I think about movement automatically. How clothes move, how we move in clothing, you know, that is such a grand art form, really. It's interesting you're bringing your expertise to this, which is a very interesting perspective. And congratulations to you and Leslie. All right.
Thank you.
My ending question then, Alexis, has to be, as Leslie just answered, she was thinking of a word that really described who she is. Alexis, do you have something in your mind that describes who you are from the heart?
Well, I think that based off of what I said about the lifelong learning would be discovery would be a good word.
There you go.
Always constantly learning something. So discovery would be my word.
You're inspiring others by saying that. I love it. And Joan Goldin, if I have to ask you, is there one word or phrase that you can share with us that allows your audience to really know the heart of who you are? What would it be?
Oh, well, breaking boundaries, duration. I would say duration. Duration is a big word for me.
Wow. Very exciting. I'm getting a lot of unexpected answers here. I love this. And Leigh, Taylor Mickelson, how would you describe yourself then from the heart?
Well, I used my word joy already, so I'm thinking of something else. I'm trying, how would I guess I could say, I guess I could, I'm like kind of not thinking of another word besides that word, but,
I said that, didn't
you? Yeah.
Maybe we're just going to see a whole new art form from you pretty soon.
Yeah.
Another form
maybe.
of nature. And,
right.
And
yes.
With that, I think we can end our afternoon together. And I think all of you have been absolutely fantastic in sharing who you are, because the understanding of art is everything, isn't it? And for the listener who might be out there reading, okay, forms of nature, maybe I'll go, maybe I won't. Maybe you have tipped the scale now to send them to the Flinn Gallery to see this fantastic installation. And bravo to all of you, really, for sharing your art, for the Flinn, for the courage of the Flinn, and the architecture that we're going to see there. I encourage everyone to go. Is there anything else to say in parting, ladies?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the good questions. Thank you. Questions.
Well, I always try. But
yes,
I have to say, the Flinn is the treasure of Greenwich. It really is. Without any question. So bless you for all you do. And we will be there to support you. And please go to flynngallery.com for more information on this. Please check the opening hours online of the Greenwich Library itself. Ladies, I wish you all the best, and all the best for a great success. So to all my listeners out there, stay safe. This is Pamela Kuhn, and the curtain is now down on Center Stage.